You've heard it said that we are all in the people business. Research and personal experience consistently tells us that interpersonal skills are the overwhelming key to success in business and our careers. Our guest today would agree with all that. And that's why he suggests we focus on growing our relationship currency. You may or not have heard that phrase before. That is our focus today as we build habits to help us communicate better, build trust, and have greater influence or relationship currency. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are here to help you reach your potential as a leader and a human being, growing personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for your team, organization, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could be with us live in the future, when you could learn more about this information sooner, when you could get a leg up, if you will. And the only way to do that is to get connected with us on either Facebook or LinkedIn, two of the platforms where these episodes live stream. You can connect with us there, get the inside scoop, know when we're going to go live. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. If you like what you hear today and you want help in developing the leaders in your organization, let's talk. Reach out to us at info@kevineikenberry.com, and we'll schedule time to learn about your needs and share how we might help. Today, my guest, let me bring him in. No further ado, my guest today is Ravi Rajani. He's the author of this book that I just mentioned a second ago, Relationship Currency. Let me just introduce him formally for you. He's the author of Relationship Currency, 5 Communication Habits for Limitless Influence and Business Success. He's an international keynote speaker, communication expert, and a LinkedIn learning instructor with popular courses on both conscious and charismatic communication. He has worked with leaders, teams, and organizations, including at Oracle, NetSuite, T-Mobile, Sherwin-Williams, and of course, many more. He lives outside of London with his wife, son, daughter, and their West Highland Terrier. And now you have just endeared yourself to all the dog lovers, Ravi. And so welcome to the show. Glad to have you here, sir.
Thank you, my friend. And I appreciate the intentional introduction. It still feels cool to hear the word author. I know it's a label, I know it's a title, but it still feels cool. You know, after you work on a body of work for so long, it feels cool. You know, I got to say, it feels cool.
Well, we might end up talking about your internal story as it relates to that in a minute. We'll get to that. That's a little bit of a preview. But before we go there, let's talk about this phrase, relationship currency. It's the title of the book. I often say when I hear things, I say, well, I know both of those words, but I may not know them when they're hooked together. In this case, I think I do, but I think it's from a context perspective. It's helpful for everyone to have a sense of what you mean when you say relationship currency.
More than happy to give you my truth on it. But as I do talk, ladies and gents, if you have your own definition of relationship currency, let us know in the chat. I'm curious to know. Let us know if you know in the chat. And if you're listening to this right now on the podcast, you can't do that. But anyway.
But you can think about your answer, because that thought is still useful, right? For you personally.
Exactly. Now, for me, relationship currency, here's how I see it, Kevin. You know, we have relationships, which are sacred, currency, which carries a connotation of transaction. But side by side, when you pair them together, it's about two human beings coming together to engage in a meaningful value exchange. And you helping somebody achieve more of what they desire without self-interest. And the key word being without self-interest.
Absolutely. And the other thing about the word currency is, you know, and you said it at the end, value exchange, that when we think about that word currency, we think about there's value there. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's about them. It's about being other focused as it relates to that. We'll get to all of that. But there's something else that I love about the title of the book.
Tell me.
And long-term listeners will not be surprised. But it's the fact that you said habits. Right. You didn't say, what are the skills? You said, what are the habits? Now, I know this was intentional. I also know no one may have ever asked you this question, but why do you frame this around habits?
You are the second person, I would say. You're not the first there, you're the second. I know you're like, damn it, I was hoping, but this is the second time. And I enjoyed the question because here's my truth around it. If we break it down, really what we're looking at is, as authors, if we're going to give ourselves that label, which we'll get into in a minute, but as authors, speakers, people who are gifted the opportunity to actually inspire change, what we're really trying to do is inspire change. And change is hard. What we're trying to do is have somebody depart from an existing set of behaviors and substitute them for another set of behaviors. And when done consistently, they will turn into habits. So, really, my goal with calling everything a habit was, at a macro level, yes, we're calling them a habit because that's what I want others to embody. But each habit comes with a practice and an associated behavior. And the idea here is, if you resonate with it, if you try a practice on for size, you'll engage in that behavior more consistently. A proportion of those behaviors will turn into habits. And before you know it, you'll reach unconscious competence with the skill set in question, which is becoming a masterful communicator and earning relationship currency.
Yeah, I love this because I mean I've said, and this is why people that know me that are listening will smile, that for a long time I've said, listen, it's not about skills. Like, I'm in the business of helping people learn. I'm in the business of training and consulting, all this other stuff.
Sure.
And so but people want to focus on skill set, but it's mindset, skill set, habit set. If we don't change the habit, it doesn't matter. Like, I can have the tool in my toolkit. If I don't
Yes.
pull it out, it really doesn't matter. So that I'm all
Mm.
in, and the book does a great job of that. And I'm going to get to these 5 habits. We will not have time. I'll just tell everybody up front. We will not have time to talk in any depth about all 5. We will probably talk about a couple, and we'll get there. But before we get there, there's a couple of underlying pieces before we get to the habits. And in part, I think this is Kevin getting at the mindset part of this. And that is the first thing is the word influence. Again, in the title, you say limitless influence, which sounds pretty good. When you talk about the word influence, for some carries some baggage, right? So let's talk about what you mean here. I think if people have been listening, they're not going to be surprised by how you answer, but it's important that we talk about what we're talking about here related to influence and the underpinnings of this whole conversation.
Well, if you listen to this live, let me know, what is the first word that comes up for you when I say the word influence? I mean, Kevin, for you, when I say the word influence, what comes up for you? What's the first word that comes up for you?
Well, for me, the first word is opportunity, but I've done that very exercise with lots of people. And I know that you often get a lot of, well, what about manipulation? You get a
Yeah.
lot of, there's a lot of tension for some people around that word, that it's not always greeted with positive intention, right? It is for me, but it isn't for everyone.
That's true. That's true, my friend. And it's funny, the name of the book, fun fact, the name of the book originally was Limitless Influence. So get this, I'm at an event, flew down to Fort Lauderdale for this event, and I connect with this individual. We're having fun. We're connecting. We're going deep. He says, "You've written a book." I said, "Yes, I have." He said, "Tell me the name." I said, "Limitless Influence." And he's like, "What?" I said, "Limitless Influence." And he's like, that was his first reaction. "I don't like it." And I was like, "Okay, tell me more." And he said, "Listen, influence, you may think about it in a beautiful way, but your ideal readers, they may resonate with it in a sense of manipulation." He goes, "Have a think about it." So I sat with it and I was like, damn it, I'm gonna have to change the name of the book. But luckily, I didn't have to change anything inside the book because the book was always about relationship currency. So phew, that's a good sign. My publisher was happy about that. But for me, if we look at the definition of influence according to Oxford Learners Dictionaries. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of the effect that somebody or something has on a way that a thing works or develops. Now, for me, as I talk about in the book, really it's about the positive effect that we have on an individual. And in order to really, or rather, let me be more specific. The positive effect that we can have on an individual to increase their receptiveness to change. Now, for me, often the word influence gets muddied with the word influencer or influential. And I just like to keep it really, really basic. Where, listen, if our job is to help somebody achieve and receive more of what they desire without self-interest, we need to increase our capacity to have a positive effect on that person to support them with that process.
Yeah, I love that. So I promised we get to some of the habits, and we
That's
will. And the
okay.
other under, and so that's that definition,
Hmm.
that perspective on influence is woven through all five. Like, so if you're listening and you say, yeah, I like that definition, I'm in, then you want to don't go anywhere, stay right here. But there's another underlying principle that you talk about early, but is woven through the whole book, even though it happens to be inside of one of the habits. And
Right.
it's the idea of trust. And what
Hmm.
I'd love for you to do real quick is talk about what you call the 3 C's of trust.
I love it. Well, for me, in order to establish trust with another human being in a conversation, we need to earn the 3 C's. And those 3 C's are connection, character, and competence. So connection at the most basic level, I see it as the emotional glue that forges a bond between two human beings in a given moment. Then we've got character, which is the invisible values that travel with you, your energy, your verbal communication, and nonverbal communication. And then we've got competence, which is your ability to signal your expertise in solving somebody's big problem. As a result, increasing or decreasing your credibility stock. And the idea here is every habit that I teach inside of this book helps you earn one of the 3 C's or all of the 3 C's and ultimately strengthen trust in any and every conversation.
I want to go back to something that the short little story you told about when you were in Fort Lauderdale, and you
Yeah.
here's what you said. I met this guy, and we had a connection.
Hmm.
And because of, you did not know, you just met this guy, I think. Uh, so you had a connection. You may or may not have, you may not have really known a whole lot about his competence, whether he knew much about whatever. You may not have had, you had some sense of character from the, as you've described it, from the conversation. But the point that I want to make from that story is that you trusted that person from the connection point enough alone to help you rethink something really important. And the reason I share that is that because I've talked with lots of people and done a lot of training and talking about trust over the years. And some people think about it like you can't, like you have to earn it and you're never going to get it. It's going to take forever to make that happen. And there's truth there, but it's not total truth there. Your point is like it can happen. We can make that, we can make a connection and people will feel something in a way to say like there's I can trust this person, at least in some ways, right? Much
Mm,
more quickly. So
definitely.
comments, thoughts about that?
Well, I'll give you an example. Let's go deeper into this because this is exciting. So, I'd love to hear your take on if this resonates or if there's anything I've missed or misunderstood. But let's go deeper. So, this individual was an agent at a speaker bureau. Okay. And they were there to listen to hear me deliver a keynote. Oh, look at my friend Nishil in the comments. He says, really enjoyed listening to this, Ravi Rajani, especially your concept around the 3 C's. I love it. I love it. So, yeah, there you go. Nishil getting some prime time action there. So here's the background. He had spent, a couple of hours with me already before that comment. So let's look at connection. Now, before the day started, we had a few conversations, we
Right?
exchanged stories. The emotional glue began to build throughout the first hour or two.
Mhm.
Character. What I saw about this individual is that they operated with integrity. They didn't tell me, they showed me. And here's why. When they were listening to other speakers, they spoke their mind in a kind and compassionate way. They didn't mince their words. If they saw something, they said it. So I knew this person really is going to operate in a way that is congruent with their value system. Competence. He was one of the few agents chosen to be in that room because he spent decades looking at different speakers.
He had that. He got that one coming in.
He had that off the bat, right? Because I didn't even have to see him, but my skepticism, because if we look at trust and skepticism, normally when we enter a room, right, Kevin, trust is at its lowest and skepticism is at its highest, assuming it's a complete cold audience. But more than often, that's not the case because people are building a story in their own mind about you from your social media, from what they're seeing, what they're hearing, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but you get what I'm coming from. So what I'm really trying to say here is he had established the 3 C's very quickly. And as a result, I trusted him. But then here's the kicker. It requires, I think kicker's the right phrase. I don't know. But here's the thing, okay? It requires self-trust to take on somebody's feedback, sit with it. How does this feel intellectually? How does this feel intuitively? And then make a decision. Because I can tell you now, 100 people, other people may have said the same thing to me that day, but I probably wouldn't have taken it on board.
The same way. Exactly right. So just as a little insight to all of you, especially if you're, well, whether this is the first time you're listening or whether you've been here before, I can tell you that I think about these 3 ideas when I'm building my planning for these conversations and when I'm having these conversations. Why? Because I want you first of all, I want to have some of that built with my guest because it'll make a better conversation. And it'll make a better podcast. But if I can build that in some way, even if it's just at the start with a guest, then that creates something far better for the audience, which is the ultimate goal for both, in this case, Ravi and I to do. So I've shared, you and I, we could spend our entire time on those 3 C's, and we've already spent half our time on that. But I do want us to go a little further. But I thought that was a really important way to help people. There's other ways that we can deconstruct trust if you want, but they mostly all come back, whether you use those 3 words or not, they come back to those 3 ideas. And too often people seem to think that trust isn't all of them, that it's like one of them. Like a new leader will say, well, I don't have competence. I've never done this before. How will they trust me? And I'll say, that's part of it. It's not all of this. It's just part of this. Just using that as an example. So there are 5 habits. We are not going to get to them all. I hinted at one of them already. And I said, and the first one is what you call figuring out or understanding our internal story. And I'd love you to talk about this one because I think it's so important. And it's what happens before we get to a conversation. It's what happens before we get to communication. Why is this included? What is it? Why is it included? And what do we need to be thinking about here?
To be sensitive at the time that we have, let's boil it down to the following sentence, right? We are the stories that we tell ourselves. We are the stories we tell ourselves. Now, let's back it up just a little bit. I said to you at the top of this show, man, it's so cool to be given the label of an author. It's so cool to say author. Now, let's be real. The word author, the word leader, whatever it could be, entrepreneur is a label. Now, if you go into your kitchen, you open the cupboard, you pick up a jar and you see a label on it, good. I want to see a label on it. I want to know that this is jam. I want to know the ingredients. I want to know that the identity of this product is fixed. Try and apply this to a human being. It can be problematic because what we end up doing is engaging in behaviors that are congruent with the label. And it can leave us creating this self-imposed cage where we secretly and subconsciously, once again, engage in behaviors which are designed to protect that identity. So I'll give an example, something that I personally did when it came to looking at the book. This was my first rodeo. with writing a book. So I wanted to embody the identity of a world-class author. So I would say I'm a world-class author. Okay, I wanted to embody that identity, but very quickly, as I started going through the writing journey, I switched it to I am someone who writes books. Because does that mean I say no to coaching, consulting, speaking opportunities? No, or I would have to if I just say I am an author. Now, the label I'm proud to own: father, husband, right? Son, brother, friend. But outside of that, it can get tricky because it leads to certain beliefs and thus stories that we tell ourselves, which show up in our conversations. What do you think?
Oh, 100%. Like I've written a lot about this as well. And one of the things that I say is like, it's hard. And you said this earlier, like it's hard to change a habit.
Mm,
It's harder to change an identity. And it's nearly impossible to change a habit if it isn't connected to, aligned with
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
identity. So I love your point. Like there's a there's a there's a powerful idea about manifesting, but there's a very powerful idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy that we want to be really careful about. And I love that you started here, because how can we build relationship currency with others if we're not clear for ourselves about what we're about, what we're trying to be? And it's going to be really hard to change the other habits if we don't have this. I love that. I love this one came first.
But don't you think, sorry to interrupt you there, Kevin. Just to add something there, my friend, is if you look at a lot of the individuals that listen to this show, they may say things like, I am an empathetic leader. Okay. Now they proudly wear that label and title. So maybe when it comes to owning, or rather setting boundaries, having difficult conversations, they go, I can't do that.
Yep.
I'm an empathetic leader. I'm this, I'm that. So it's quite interesting when we expand our identity and expand our being, beautiful things happen. So I'll
You
let
are
you.
right in the zeitgeist of my last book, Flexible Leadership, right?
Okay.
I call them flexors. Like there's a tension between two things, right? Like
Hmm.
I am more about the people, or I'm more about the outcomes. Well, we need to be about both. And
Yeah.
yes, I can know that I lean toward the people side, but there's a time when I have to let go. The situation, the context dictates where I need to be on that. And that's why this identity stuff is so important for us to be careful about. We don't
Mm,
have more time to spend there. I want to get to a couple more of these habits. And I
right.
want to get to another place where you and I are in agreement, which is about charisma, because you say unearthing charisma, which is another reason why it would have been hard to put charisma in here if it was a skill,
Yeah.
right?
We all
So
have it.
say more about that, because you start out that chapter, and I'm like, preach on, brother, because you're exactly right, and so many people miss this point. Really important.
I know I did growing up. I grossly missed the point. And by the way, before we get into it, Cyrus Lane says, hi, how you doing, my friend? Good to have you. If you've got any questions, by the way, don't hold back. We are here. We are ready. So charisma, I had it all wrong, Kevin. I had it all wrong. I thought it was about accolades, awards, the spotlight. And look, I've got to give my younger self kudos because he did the best he could with the consciousness that he had at the time. So let's integrate him for a moment and say thank you. But what I now believe in this season of my life is charisma is a superpower that we all possess. It's innate. We need to unearth it. And when we do, it allows others to feel significant in our presence. Meaning, if you make people feel like they matter when they're around you, you, my friend, have unearthed your charisma. So let's get tactical here. Let's say you're a leader and you're wondering, how can I do this in the next 24 hours? Well, one of the practices I actually talk about in the book is learning how to give genuine compliments. And I say genuine because if they're inauthentic, you're in trouble, my friend. So once you learn this, if you weaponize this, that's on you. Don't say, oh, I listened to this podcast with Kevin and Ravi and this guy. No, don't blame us, okay? Do not weaponize this. So Imagine if I'm at an event, Kevin, and I see you speak and I go, oh man, that was a great speech. Such a great speech. You're like, oh, okay. Thank you, Ravi. It's well intentioned, but it lacks depth. It lacks specificity. It lacks impact. It lacks authenticity. It lacks many things. So, how do we transform that compliment? Let's talk about something that I call my ASI framework: authenticity, meaning lead with a genuine and positive observation. S is specificity, meaning avoid being generic. And I is impact, meaning talk about how this specific moment impacted you. So let's run it back. I hear you speak, you come off stage, and I say, Kevin, that was the best keynote speech I've heard at this conference for the past 2 days. That moment in the first few minutes where you spoke about the pain that you went through and imposter syndrome when writing flexible leadership, it really connected with me. And I tell you what, it's actually inspired me to use more vulnerable personal stories in my next book and in my next speech. So, hey, thank you for that. That embodies, right, ASI. Authenticity was the positive observation of that's, for me, the best keynote I've heard. Specificity, what you did in the first 3 minutes. Impact, how that moment impacted me. Now, run it back, right? Let's run it back. If you're a leader trying to acknowledge somebody in your team, know this, that research has shown that when somebody receives a genuine compliment, it actually activates the same part of our brain that lights up when we receive a financial reward. So when you acknowledge somebody for their genius in public, you make them feel like they matter when they're around you. And I remember back in the day, there was a guy who I worked with in corporate, and he would acknowledge me in front of my boss and in front of the whole team for my gifts. And he would do it in such an elegant and authentic way. And by the end of it, I just wanted to run through a brick wall for this guy, right?
Yeah. So we were talking earlier about our internal story, and if I can tie these two ideas together of these two of the 5 habits, I would say this: that if we can move our internal story to saying that we have charisma or that we are charismatic, that serves us, because charisma is that ability for people to feel attracted to us because of how we've made them feel. Right.
Exactly, my friend. And seeing it as I am someone who makes people feel significant when I am around them. So we're moving from the label of charisma to, okay, expanding our identity. But exactly as you said, if you don't have a story that you're telling yourself that's abundant and you are stuck in reactive behavior. Now, I'm going to pull from the definition of the spiritual wisdom of Kabbalah. And when we talk about reactive behavior, we're talking about any behavior that's grounded in lack, scarcity, or fear. If you secretly are worried about your number 2 surpassing you, quote unquote, if you're secretly worried about losing your job, if you're secretly worried about being seen as a fraud, you won't be telling yourself an abundant story. And as a result, the compliments you give won't inspire change. They may just feel forced.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So we don't have time to dive into the other 3. I was really hoping to spend time on, let's see, this would be the second of the 5 habits. We don't have time. I want to just tell everybody this. So I've been talking with Ravi Rajani, the author of, if you just came in late, of Relationship Currency. And I would say that if you've been connecting with any of the stuff we talked about, you want to copy. But I would also say that you want it, if for no other reason, to read about the second habit, which we're not going to talk about, which is conscious questioning and deep listening. And the reason that I think, Ravi, like lots of stuff's been written about questioning, right? But the way that you frame up conscious questioning, just without being able to dive in, just tell people what you think the 3 kinds of conscious questions are.
Should we do it in 60 seconds? You see?
Yeah.
We go 60 seconds.
Go.
So, conscious questions. Asking a question with positive intentionality, not negative intentionality. You can go deeper into that in the book. Now, let's talk about one type of conscious question you can ask. a story-worthy question, as I call it, aka an open-ended question, meaning the North Star is simple. Yes, somebody exchanging a story with you, but the ultimate North Star is somebody pausing, saying nothing, reflecting, and thinking, wow, I've never been asked that question before in that way. AKA telling them a positive story about you because you have a character of intention. Let's walk through a quick example. Instead of you saying, hey, do you want to switch suppliers? You could say, hey, could you tell me about the moment when you first sensed trouble with your existing supplier? Oh yeah, I remember it was last year around Christmas when they hit us with an 18% price increase. 18% price increase. Yeah, it was all of a sudden a beautiful conversation is beginning to occur and rapport is being built.
Yep. Perfect. That's one of only 3 types of those questions. There's another habit about storytelling specifically, and the last one kind of comes back to where we started about trust, about communicating to become a trusted guide. So those are the 5 habits. We don't have time to unpack them any more than that because I have a couple of things I want to ask you, Ravi. But I do want to ask this because some people may be thinking that, hey, the world is more complex than it used to be because I'm having conversations. I'm communicating. May not be having conversations, but I'm communicating with people that I'm not in physical contact with. They're on a different work schedule than me. They're halfway across the world. We're all remote, like whatever. Is there any specific thing you would say to us? Because most of us are actually in that context one way or the other. Is there any specific thing you'd say about these ideas at distance?
Just so I'm understanding the question, the concept of communicating in such
In
an
any of these sorts of
oh,
ways
yeah, okay.
that is complicated in some ways because we're doing it at distance. So
Sure.
acknowledging that fact, what advice do you have?
I would say ask yourself, who do I need to become to ensure I have more presence in every conversation? So I'll give an example. For me personally, I like to have a daily spiritual practice which allows me to ground myself. When I feel grounded, I enter every conversation feeling less reactive. When I feel grounded, I'm not operating from a place of scarcity, I'm operating from a place of abundance. And when I'm feeling grounded, I can listen to the other person. I really can, versus thinking about what cool thing I want to say next. So I would invite your listeners to think about what practices could they engage in to elevate their presence in their next conversation.
I love that so much. And I can tell you what it isn't, which is to run from meeting to meeting and tell yourself you're busy. Because like that is the antithesis of what Ravi just said. So I'll leave it there. There's a couple of other things I want to ask you, Ravi, before we go.
Sure.
And I'm really curious. What do you do for fun?
Well, I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So there's lots
And
there's
a dog.
yeah, exactly. And a dog. So whether it's hanging out with my kids, it's hanging out with my kids. These days, I'm in a season right now where, them being 3 and 1, it's like daddy is still cool. Every day is a new day. And I know that there'll come a
That's
day.
not always, I hate to say it. You won't always be cool like you are right now.
Exactly, right? I don't personally think I'm cool right now, but they do. So I'll take it. But, I'm very aware that very soon, at some point, it will come when they don't want to hang out with dad. They don't think he's cool anymore. They see me for all of my imperfections and flaws. So for me, being a present dad is fun.
And what are you reading these days?
So I've just finished up, or rather, I'm finishing a book by Greg McKeown, and I may have butchered his surname, so apologies, my friend, if you are listening to this. But it's called Less is More. Is it called Less is More? No, Essentialism. That's it. Essentialism. And the idea is less but better. And in a world that is so noisy, which tells you you need to do more, be more, it's great to hear a narrative about sometimes less is more.
Essentialism. We'll have the link to that in the show notes. We'll also have a link to Ravi's book, Relationship Currency. But as I'm holding this up, where do you want to point people? If people want to get connected with you, ask more, learn more, where should they go?
So
What should
the
they do?
place, yeah. Well, listen, firstly, if you feel called to purchase a copy of the book, you can buy it on Amazon or you could listen to it on Audible. I narrate it 12 hours in the studio over 3 days. It was tough, but I narrated it. And yeah, you could listen and learn more about the 5 habits there. But regardless, I'd love to hear more about what resonated with you the most and learn a little bit more about your leadership challenges. So you can drop me a note on LinkedIn. You can drop me a note on LinkedIn.
You can also go to theravirajani.com with the on the front. I kind of like that, my friend.
RaviRajani.com was taken, so what do we do? We've got to own the.
We're just call it the RaviRajani.com. So I don't have that problem with KevinEikenberry.com. It's like there probably are others, but anyway. By the way, here's what you could do. I did this when my kids were little. I bought their domain names.
Wow, that's cool.
They didn't care for a long time, but anyway, yeah,
that is cool.
It costs you like $15 a year.
That's I've never heard of that that's really never heard of it. Very unique. I love that.
Listen, everybody, there's a question that I ask here every week, and it's not a question for my guests. It's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the only reason we're doing this at the end of the day is for you. And the question is, now what? It's the most important question you could ask yourself and answer yourself after listening to a conversation about some really impactful ideas, because ideas are wonderful. Actions change the world. So the question here is, what did you get today that you will act on? Maybe you're going to work on giving feedback using ASI. Maybe you're going to think differently about your internal story. I don't know what it is, but what I do know is that until you take that action, none of this will have really made any difference or made any dent in the world for you. And you're here to make a difference in the world. So why not? Right? Why not make that difference? So, Ravi, thank you for being here. Such a pleasure to have you. I had a great time. I hope you did as well. And all of you that are listening, I hope you did too, which means if you did, you'll want to make sure you come back. So if you're not subscribed, wherever you're watching or listening, make sure you're subscribed and come back next week so you don't miss any other episodes of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.